When Eleanor Harrington's private jet touched down earlier than scheduled, the billionaire philanthropist felt a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation swirling in her chest. She'd wrapped up her Tokyo business trip 2 days early, a rare moment when negotiations ended smoothly. And instead of alerting her staff of her early return, she decided to simply show up. Eleanor loved surprises, but she rarely experienced them from the giving side. Today felt like a chance to do just that, to step out of her perfectly structured world and back into the quiet familiarity of home. Her mansion, perched on the hillside overlooking the city, stood in its usual grandeur, tall windows glinting like crystals, white marble pillars glowing under the afternoon sun, and manicured gardens that lined the long driveway. The chauffeur dropped her off, and Eleanor waved away the valet who rushed forward, insisting she could handle her own small suitcase. Today, she wanted normalcy. She wanted to walk through her home like any ordinary person returning after a long trip. As she approached the entrance, she noticed something peculiar, the faint sound of giggles. Soft, high-pitched, rhythmic giggles, strangely musical, yet somehow not fully audible. Eleanor paused, brows knitting. Her mansion was usually quiet at this hour. Her staff followed strict schedules. The cleaners in the mornings, the gardeners after lunch, and Harold, the janitor, usually somewhere mopping the West Hall floors until late afternoon. But giggles? That was new. She stepped inside, her heels echoing against the marble floor. "Hello, I'm home early," she called out, expecting the household manager to hurry toward her. But no one came. The giggles, however, continued, this time accompanied by soft thumps, like children hopping or dancing. Curious, Eleanor followed the sound past the main hall, around the corner, and toward the indoor sunroom. With each step, she noticed more things out of place. A small, colorful ball tucked near the baseboard, a tiny pink shoe resting beside a potted plant, and what appeared to be a crayon drawing taped. Yes, taped, onto the sidewall. Her heartbeat quickened. Children? In her house. She reached the sunroom doorway and stopped dead in her tracks. Her jaw loosened. Her bag slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. There, in the center of her sunlit room, stood Harold, the quiet, humble janitor she'd employed for over 10 years. He wore his usual faded blue work shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, thin glasses slipping down his nose. But what struck Eleanor wasn't Harold. It was the 3 small children gathered around him. Triplets. Tiny, bright-eyed, identical triplets. 2 girls and 1 boy, about 4 years old. They weren't just giggling, they were signing. Their small hands moved rapidly as they communicated, smiles blooming on their faces like morning sunbursts. Harold was signing back, slower but steady. Eleanor blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. Her sunroom looked completely transformed. A blanket fort draped between furniture, soft toys lining the floor, coloring books spread open. It was a scene of warmth, pure, wholesome, and utterly unexpected. One of the girls noticed Eleanor first. She tugged Harold's sleeve and pointed. Harold turned, and his eyes widened when he saw his employer standing frozen in the doorway. He quickly stood, wiping his hands nervously on his shirt. "Miss Harrington, I didn't expect you home today." Eleanor opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she was speechless. She glanced from Harold to the children, then back. "Harold, what's going on?" The boy toddled forward, chubby cheeks dimpling as he smiled. He raised his hands and signed something Eleanor didn't understand, but the joy in his expression was unmistakable. "These are my grandkids," Harold said quietly. "Well, my daughter's children. She's been having a hard time lately, so I watch them after my shifts." He paused, swallowing. "They're deaf. Born that way." The explanation made sense, but what Eleanor saw went far beyond a simple babysitting arrangement. Harold wasn't just watching them. He was loving them, caring for them, creating a safe bubble of happiness right inside her home. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," he added, stepping protectively in front of the children. They were supposed to stay in the maintenance quarters, not here. They love this room. The sunlight helps them see better when we sign. Eleanor slowly stepped inside. The children watched her with curiosity, their small faces open and unafraid. She felt something soften inside her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Harold," she said gently, "why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged. "You're busy. I didn't want to bother you with my family problems." Eleanor knelt down, lowering herself so she was eye level with the children. One of the girls crawled closer, her tiny fingers reaching out to touch Eleanor's bracelet, fascinated by how the metal shimmered in the sun. A laugh escaped Eleanor, light, genuine, unguarded. "They're beautiful," she whispered. Harold's shoulders loosened with relief. And in that moment, Eleanor knew something. Her unannounced return wasn't an inconvenience. It wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning of something she never knew she was missing. A rediscovery of kindness inside her own home. Eleanor had always considered herself observant, yet nothing in her structured billionaire life had prepared her for the tender scene unfolding before her. As she stood in the sunlit room surrounded by the janitor's 3 deaf grandchildren, she realized she was stepping into a world that operated on a completely different rhythm. Quieter, softer, and unexpectedly beautiful. The triplets watched her with innocent curiosity, their tiny hands poised mid-gesture, as if waiting for a cue. Eleanor smiled, settling on the floor to seem less intimidating. Harold knelt beside them, adjusting his glasses nervously. "This is Ms. Harrington." He signed slowly to the children, exaggerating each movement so they could read him clearly. The boy giggled silently and waved his whole arm in greeting. The little girl with braided hair leaned forward, studying Eleanor like she was a character in a storybook. "What's her name?" Eleanor asked, pointing gently. "Ella," Harold replied. "The one with the purple clip is Emma. And the boy is Eli." Ella, Emma, and Eli. The names fit them perfectly, soft, melodic, almost magical. Eleanor repeated their names aloud, even though she knew the children couldn't hear them. There was something grounding about saying them, like acknowledging their place in her home, made the moment feel more real. Ella crawled closer and lifted Eleanor's hand, placing it against her small chest. Eleanor blinked, unsure of the meaning. "She's telling you she likes you," Harold explained quietly. "That's how she shows affection." A warmth spread up Eleanor's arm, settling in her chest. Without thinking, she gently placed her hand over Ella's tiny one and smiled. Emma, not wanting to be outdone, toddled over and sat directly in Eleanor's lap. Eli soon followed, tracing the diamonds on her bracelet with awe. Eleanor let out a soft laugh. She couldn't remember the last time children had been near her. Her world was boardrooms, charity galas, and adults who always wanted something. These 3 wanted nothing except closeness. Harold shifted uneasily. "Ma'am, I understand if you're upset. I didn't mean to overstep." "Harold," Eleanor interrupted gently, "I'm not upset." He blinked. "You're not?" "No," she said with a softness that surprised even her. "I'm just trying to understand." She glanced around the room again. Crayons, blankets, tiny socks, toys that somehow seemed perfectly at home among her expensive decor. "How long have you been watching them here?" "About 2 months," he admitted. "Their mother works double shifts, and daycare for children with special needs is, well, it's expensive." He lowered his voice. "Too expensive." Eleanor's chest tightened. She had donated millions to children's charities across the world, yet right under her nose was a family struggling in silence. "You should have told me," she murmured. "I didn't want pity," Harold replied. "Just a safe place for them until my daughter gets back on her feet." Emma tugged at Eleanor's sleeve and signed something quickly. Eleanor looked to Harold for a translation. "She's asking if you want to play," he chuckled. "She thinks your earrings are sparkly like fairy wings. That means you look like a fairy to her." Eleanor laughed, a genuine, warm laugh that even surprised herself. "A fairy? I haven't been called that before." She tapped Emma's nose, earning a shy smile. The triplets crawled toward a stack of colored blocks and began building a small tower. Their movements were coordinated in a way that was almost instinctive, as if they each understood what the others wanted without speaking. Eleanor watched them, fascinated by the silent world they existed in. They communicated through glances, gestures, and tiny taps, Whispers made of motion instead of sound. Do they sign fluently? Eleanor asked. As fluently as 4-year-olds can, Harold said proudly. My daughter taught them early. I'm still learning. Eli suddenly toppled the block tower with a dramatic flourish. His sisters gasped silently, then burst into waves of soundless laughter. Eleanor laughed with them, unable to resist their joy. What do they like to do? She asked. Coloring, dancing, building things, and Harold paused, scratching his head. They love stories, but not the typical kind. They like ones with lots of expressions, big gestures. Helps them understand. Eleanor brightened. I know a few stories. The triplets froze, watching her intently. Intrigued, expectant. So Eleanor launched into one of her childhood favorites. A tale about a tiny bird who believed she was too small to fly until she discovered she had the biggest heart in the forest. But instead of reading it like an adult, Eleanor animated every moment, flapping her arms when the bird tried to fly, widening her eyes dramatically when the storm came, pretending to shrink when the bird felt afraid. The children were captivated. They followed her every movement, every expression, every subtle gesture. When she mimicked the bird's triumphant flight, all three jumped up and flapped their arms, giggling silently, spinning in little circles. Eleanor's heart squeezed at the sight. You're a natural, Harold said softly. They never connect with people this quickly. Eleanor felt something unfamiliar welling inside her. Pride, maybe, or something deeper. They're easy to love, she whispered. For a long moment, they all simply existed together in that warm, sunlit room. 3 children who lived in silence. 1 janitor with a heart far bigger than his job title, and 1 billionaire who realized she had been missing something essential in her life without ever knowing it. Then, unexpectedly, Ella took Eleanor's hand and placed it on her cheek. Slowly, carefully, she signed a single word. Harold translated, voice trembling. She's calling you friend. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. She signed the word back, clumsy, awkward, but sincere. The children's faces lit up with joy. Eleanor had no idea how deeply that simple gesture would change her life, or how far this new bond would reach. But in that quiet moment, she understood one thing with certainty. The world of silence wasn't empty. It was full of love, waiting to be heard with the heart instead of the ears. Eleanor woke the next morning with an unusual lightness in her chest. She had slept surprisingly well, despite her mind replaying the previous day over and over. The giggles, the tiny hands, the silent laughter, and the moment when Ella called her friend. It had been years since anyone had called her that without an agenda. Even longer since a child had looked at her with such pure trust. She placed her feet on the floor, inhaling deeply. There was a faint scent of lavender drifting in from the hallway, mixed with something else. Pancakes? She raised an eyebrow. Pancakes did not exist in her home unless there was a catered brunch or a special event. Curious, she slipped on her robe and made her way downstairs. As she approached the kitchen, she heard soft thumps again. She smiled. She knew exactly who it was. When she turned the corner, there they were, the triplets, all standing on small step stools near the island, vigorously stirring bowls of batter. Pancake batter. Flour covered their tiny fingers, and their cheeks were smudged white like miniature bakers. Harold hovered behind them, trying and failing to keep the mess contained. When the children noticed Eleanor in the doorway, their faces lit up. Eli waved so hard he nearly lost balance. Ella tapped Emma excitedly, pointing toward Eleanor with a broad, proud grin. The 3 of them signed a chaotic mix of gestures that Harold struggled to interpret quickly enough. Good morning, Ms. Harrington, Harold said sheepishly. They woke up early and insisted on making breakfast. I tried to tell them this wasn't appropriate, but he sighed as Emma dropped a spoon with a splat. They're determined little ones. Eleanor couldn't help but laugh. It seems they have excellent taste. I haven't had pancakes in years. The triplets beamed at the compliment. Ella reached into her bowl and attempted to show Eleanor her batter, which resulted in a large glob sliding dangerously close to the floor. Harold swooped in with lightning speed, catching it with a plate. Saved, he grinned. Eleanor stepped forward and knelt at the children's level. Slowly, carefully, she signed good morning. Her hand still moved awkwardly, but she tried. The triplets squealed silently, their excitement vibrating through the room. Eli climbed off his stool and ran to hug her, wrapping his flower-covered arms around her robe. "Oh my," Eleanor laughed, patting his back. "I suppose this is my punishment for walking into the kitchen." The other two joined in, their small bodies warm against her. For someone who lived surrounded by luxury, Eleanor realized how starved she had been for genuine affection. When breakfast was finally plated, if one could call the uneven, slightly lumpy pancakes plated, Eleanor sat with the children at the long oak table. The triplets ate happily, dipping their pancakes in a syrup with messy enthusiasm. Harold kept apologizing for the chaos, but Eleanor waved him off. "Harold," she said softly, "I don't mind. In fact, I think this is the most fun my kitchen has seen in years." He looked surprised, almost emotional. "Thank you, ma'am. I know this isn't the kind of environment you're used to. I'll clean everything spotless afterward." Eleanor smiled. "I'm not worried about the kitchen." She watched the children a moment, then added, "I'm curious about your daughter. How is she doing?" Harold hesitated. "She's trying her best. After her husband left, she's been overwhelmed. Between the extra work shifts and the cost of caring for the triplets, she barely sleeps." He lowered his gaze. "She feels guilty that I have to help so much." Eleanor felt a pang in her chest. "Harold, she's lucky to have you." He blinked away emotion. "Thank you, ma'am." The triplets began stacking their cut pancakes into tiny syrupy towers. Emma proudly showed Eleanor her pancake castle. Eleanor pretended to gasp dramatically, earning another wave of silent giggles. After breakfast, the children tugged at her hands, leading her toward the garden. The sun had just risen fully, casting warm gold across the lawn. The trio ran ahead, chasing each other with bursts of laughter only visible through their body language. Eleanor followed, her robe swishing behind her like a cape. Harold walked beside her. "They like the garden," he said. "They say the flowers talk because they move in the wind." "That's beautiful," Eleanor murmured. Emma knelt beside a patch of daisies and beckoned Eleanor to join. When Eleanor sat beside her, Emma plucked a single daisy and pressed it into her hand. Then she signed something small and sweet. Eleanor looked at Harold. "She's saying she wants you to keep it," Harold translated quietly. "She says it's a happy flower." Eleanor swallowed the sudden lump in her throat. She tucked the daisy behind her ear, and Emma's delighted grin was worth more than any diamond she owned. But as the sun soaked into her skin, a bittersweet thought came to her. This wasn't her life. These weren't her children. Their joy, their innocence, it was borrowed, temporary. She exhaled slowly. "Harold, what happens next?" He looked confused. "Next, ma'am, I return to my work, my meetings, my travels. And what do you do with them while your daughter works?" Harold's shoulders slumped. "Whatever I can." Ella suddenly stumbled while chasing Eli. Before she hit the ground, Eleanor caught her, scooping her up gently. Ella leaned into her chest without hesitation. Eleanor held her close, breathing in the faint scent of syrup still clinging to her hair. As she cradled the child, Eleanor realized something profound. She didn't want this to be temporary. Not the laughter, not the hugs, not the feeling of purpose that warmed her heart more than wealth ever had. Holding Ella, Eleanor whispered to Harold, "I think I might have an idea." Harold stared at her, eyes widening with hope he didn't dare express. Eleanor smiled, soft, warm, certain, because this was only the beginning, and her idea would change all their lives. Eleanor spent the rest of the morning wandering the garden with the triplets clinging to her like cheerful, flower-smudged shadows. She had conferences scheduled that day, emails waiting, and a board meeting her assistant had already reminded her about twice. But none of it pulled her attention the way the triplets did. Every tiny giggle, every tug on her sleeve, every moment of silent communication wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket she didn't know she needed. As Emma chased a butterfly with her small arms stretched out, Eleanor found herself imagining a strange and unfamiliar thought. What if her home was always filled with this kind of joy? She brushed the idea away at first. It felt too big, Too sudden, too unrealistic for someone whose life revolved around precision and control. Yet the thought returned again and again, each time appearing softer, sweeter, more possible. After an hour of play, Harold ushered the children toward the patio for water and snacks. They tire themselves out quickly, he chuckled, especially when they're excited. I can see that, Eleanor smiled. Eli had already curled up on a garden cushion, blinking slowly, fighting a nap he refused to admit he needed. Harold adjusted the little boy's blanket before turning to Eleanor. You mentioned you had an idea? His tone was hopeful, cautious, like a man afraid to ask too directly. Eleanor inhaled slowly. I do, but I want to approach it carefully. I understand, ma'am, Harold said respectfully. She gestured for him to sit beside her on one of the outdoor benches. He hesitated at first. Harold wasn't used to sitting beside billionaires, but eventually joined her. The breeze rustled the garden around them, petals dancing gently across the stone floor. The children's soft movements filled the air with a peaceful rhythm. I've been thinking about your daughter, Eleanor began, and the children, and everything. She paused, trying to find words that wouldn't sound like pity. It's a lot for one person to handle. It is, Harold admitted, staring down at his hands. But she's strong. She'll manage somehow. We always have. I know she will, Eleanor said warmly. But managing isn't the same as thriving. And your grandchildren, they deserve a place where they can flourish. Harold nodded, though uncertainty clouded his expression. And you, Harold, Eleanor added gently, you deserve support too. You've carried your family with so much love, but you aren't meant to do it alone. His breath stuttered slightly. He glanced at the triplets, who were now stacking pebbles into tiny towers. Eleanor leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. I've been thinking, I want to help. Harold blinked. You already have, ma'am. By letting them stay here, by being kind. No, she interrupted softly. I mean really help. He froze. Eleanor continued carefully. I have resources. I haven't used rooms in this home. I have connections to specialists, tutors, sign language teachers, early childhood therapists. I could offer your daughter a stable childcare arrangement. I could offer the children a safe, nurturing place to learn and grow. Harold stared at her, stunned, speechless. You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing, Eleanor whispered. These children, they've reminded me what kindness feels like, what connection feels like. I want to return that blessing. For a long moment, Harold didn't speak. His chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Ma'am, he finally said, voice trembling, you don't know what this would mean for my daughter. For these kids, we've had doors shut on us so many times. Opportunities lost because of money or because people didn't want to deal with the challenges. Eleanor's heart squeezed. I'm not shutting any doors. I'm opening them. He wiped the corner of his eye quickly, embarrassed. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything yet, she said warmly. Think about it. Talk to your daughter. I just want you to know the offer is sincere. Just then, Eli toddled over, rubbing his sleepy eyes. He climbed directly into Eleanor's lap, pressing his face in her chest. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him, swaying gently. His tiny hand rested against her collarbone, and Eleanor felt the weight of her decision settle into her heart. Solid, real, right. This boy, she whispered, brushing a strand of hair off his forehead, is going to change the world. Harold smiled, a mixture of pride and disbelief. After a moment, Emma approached, pointing at the daisy still tucked behind Eleanor's ear. She gently adjusted it, then signed a simple word. Eleanor glanced to Harold. She's saying, family, he translated quietly. Eleanor's breath caught. Her eyes prickled with unexpected emotion. Family, she repeated softly, signing it back as best she could. Emma's grin could have lit the entire mansion. The afternoon sun bathed the garden in warm gold as the triplets curled up around Eleanor, each resting against her in comfortable silence. Harold watched, his expression filled with something between gratitude and awe. Eleanor knew then, this wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a decision, a calling, a new chapter opening right in front of her. She looked at Harold with a steady, sincere gaze. Whatever happens next, I'm here. For them. For you. For your daughter. Harold nodded slowly, tears gathering again. Thank you, ma'am. Truly. I'll talk to her tonight. Eleanor smiled as the triplets dozed around her, their trust melting into her heart like sunlight on snow. And somewhere deep inside her, something whispered. This was only the beginning of the family she never knew she needed. The sun was beginning to set when Harold arrived at his daughter's small apartment. The hallway smelled faintly of old carpet and microwaved meals, a far cry from the airy brightness of Eleanor's mansion. He knocked gently, trying not to wake the neighbor's baby who always seemed to cry at the slightest sound. A moment later, the door opened to reveal a tired young woman, Lily, his daughter. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, her uniform wrinkled from her double shift at the diner. Her eyes held exhaustion, fear, and something even heavier, guilt. "Dad," she whispered, "where are the kids? Are they okay?" "They're safe," Harold said quickly, giving her a reassuring smile. "They're with Ms. Harrington. She wanted them to stay a little longer today." Lily blinked. "Ms. Harrington? The billionaire Ms. Harrington? Dad, what did you do?" "Nothing," Harold chuckled. "Well, everything, I suppose. She came home early, and she saw them." Lily's face went pale. "Without warning?" "Oh no, Dad." She pressed her hands to her face. "We're going to get in trouble. You're going to lose your job. I should have never let you take them there." "Lily," he said firmly, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Listen." She wasn't angry. "What?" "Not at all. She cared. About them. About you." Lily looked confused, as if the idea didn't fit anywhere in her tired brain. "Cared? People like her don't care about people like us." Harold shook his head gently. "I thought so too, but today proved me wrong." He guided her to the small couch, a sagging, second-hand piece of furniture that had seen better days. Lily sank into it, staring at her trembling hands. Harold sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. "Lily, she wants to help." Her eyes filled instantly with tears. "Help how?" "Dad, don't say things like that if you don't mean them." "I mean it," he assured her. She offered support. Real support. She wants the kids to have resources, a safe place to grow, opportunities we can't afford. Tears slipped down Lily's cheeks. She wiped them quickly, embarrassed. "Dad, we can't accept charity. And what if she's just being kind in the moment? What if she changes her mind? What if there are conditions?" "There are no conditions," Harold said softly. "She wants to help because the kids touched her heart, because she sees something special in them." Lily breathed shakily. I don't want them to grow up knowing they're a burden. They're already different, already struggling. I can't give them what they need, but accepting help makes me feel like I failed them." Harold wrapped an arm around her. "Lily, raising children, 3 children, at that, is never failure. You're doing more than anyone could expect." She leaned into him, crying quietly against his shoulder. For years, she had carried everything alone. Fear of bills, fear of judgment, fear of failing her children. Tonight was the first time she allowed herself to be vulnerable. "What exactly did she offer?" Lily whispered. Harold exhaled slowly. "She offered stability, access to sign language teachers, early education specialists, safe childcare while you work. And she wants to meet you." "Meet me?" Lily's voice squeaked. "Why would she want to meet me?" "Because she sees you're a good mother, and she wants to do this the right way, with your permission, with your involvement." Lily covered her mouth with one hand, trembling from the emotional weight of the moment. "I can't believe this is real." Harold gave her a warm smile. "It is, and you don't have to decide today. But I think meeting her would be a good start." Lily nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll meet her." The next morning, Eleanor stood in her sunroom, anxiously smoothing her blouse. She wasn't nervous about business meetings or investors. She'd done those 1,000 times. But meeting Lily felt personal, delicate, important. The triplets sensed the tension. They clung to her legs, offering comforting pats in their own little way. When the doorbell rang, Eleanor's heart did a little flip. She walked to the foyer, the triplets following like a tiny parade. Harold stood there with Lily beside him. She looked nervous, small, unsure of her place in such a grand home. When Eleanor opened the door, Lily instinctively stepped back. "Ms. Harrington," she whispered. I'm sorry for the trouble." "No trouble at all," Eleanor said softly. "Please come in." Lily stepped inside cautiously, like someone entering a museum where everything was priceless. The triplets immediately ran to her, wrapping their arms around her legs. She knelt, kissing each of their heads. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears forming. "Mommy's here now." Eleanor's heart squeezed. "Lily," Eleanor said gently, "your children are extraordinary." Lily looked up, startled. They are." "Yes," Eleanor said sincerely. "They're bright, loving, expressive. And they've brought light into this home I didn't realize I was missing." Lily wiped her tears, unsure how to respond. "Please," Eleanor said, gesturing toward the sunroom. "Let's sit. I'd love to talk." As they walked inside, the triplets proudly showed their mother the drawings they'd made. Lily's face softened with every picture, every smile, every silent laugh. When she finally looked at Eleanor, her eyes glowed with something new: hope. "I don't know what the future holds," Lily said quietly. "But if you really want to help, if you really mean it, then thank you. From the bottom of my heart." Eleanor took her hand gently. "I do mean it," she whispered. "And this is just the beginning." The next morning, sunlight streamed gently through the large windows of Elena's mansion, warming the polished floors and filling the quiet space with a soft glow. But unlike other mornings, today held a different kind of warmth, one that didn't come from the sun at all. It came from the presence of 3 little boys who were now fast asleep on a giant couch, wrapped in fluffy blankets like tiny burritos. Elena stood there watching them, her arms crossed softly over her chest. One triplet had an arm hanging off the couch, another was hugging a pillow, and the third had somehow rolled himself into a cocoon of blankets. She smiled, really smiled, something she hadn't done in a long time. Behind her, Janitor Maya approached quietly, holding a cup of tea. Her steps were gentle, almost cautious, as if she feared she might wake the boys or disrupt the peaceful moment. Her face still held traces of last night's anxiety, but relief had softened her eyes. "Good morning," Elena signed while whispering the words softly, trying her best to match the gestures Maya had taught her. Maya's lips parted in surprise. Her eyes glistened. You learned that fast," she whispered back. Elena shrugged a little shyly. "I practiced. I wanted to talk to your sons in a way they understand." Maya placed the cup on the table, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for everything." But Elena didn't want thanks. She wanted understanding. She wanted connection. She wanted to repair the gap her privilege had created between her world and Maya's. So she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Maya, what happened yesterday should never have happened. I judged too quickly. I assumed too much. And I made you feel small in a house you helped keep standing." She paused, letting her sincerity settle in the quiet room. "I'm sorry." Maya blinked rapidly, emotion gathering in her eyes. She shook her head and wiped at her face. "You don't need to." "Yes," Elena insisted gently. "I do." For a moment, silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with understanding, healing, mutual respect beginning to take shape. Just then, one of the triplets stirred. Little Lucas sat up groggily, rubbing his eyes before looking around. When he spotted Elena, he froze, not out of fear, but pure confusion. Elena, jumping into action, signed clumsily. "Good morning." Lucas blinked, and then slowly his face lit up. A shy smile tugged at his lips as he signed back. Maya covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "You're trying," she said softly. "Most people don't even bother." Elena knelt beside Lucas, so she was at his level. "I want them to feel welcome here," she said. "They're children. They deserve joy, not fear." Soon, the other 2 triplets, Leo and Liam, woke up too, stretching like sleepy kittens. And once they were fully awake, chaos naturally followed. Leo ran straight for the giant rug and started doing somersaults. Liam toddled over to the bookshelf and started pulling out children's books like he owned the place. And Lucas grabbed Elena's hand, tugging her toward the kitchen with the authority of a tiny army general. Maya rushed forward. No, no, don't bother Miss Elena. But Elena held up her hand, smiling. He's not bothering me. Not at all. She let Lucas lead her, his little fingers gripping hers with surprising confidence. Maya watched them quietly, her heart swelling. As they entered the kitchen, Elena greeted the chef, who nearly dropped his pan at the sight of three energetic toddlers marching in like they were about to take over the mansion. We'll need pancakes, Elena said, laughing. Lots of pancakes. The chef nodded nervously. Right away, ma'am. The triplets gathered around the counter, watching with wide eyes as batter sizzled on the hot pan. Elena stood with them, explaining everything in a slow, animated way, pointing, smiling, making silly faces to help them follow along. She didn't have to do any of this. She could have stayed distant, like she used to. But something inside her had shifted. Seeing Maya fight silently for her boys, witnessing how strong she had to be every single day, it changed Elena. When the pancakes were ready, Lucas tapped Elena's shoulder and signed. You kind. Elena froze. Her chest tightened. No reporter, no investor, no business partner had ever said words that hit her heart as strongly as that one simple phrase from a little boy who barely knew her. She bent down and signed as best she could. You brave. Lucas grinned and ran back to his brothers, sticky syrup already smeared across his cheek. Maya approached Elena quietly. You didn't have to do all this, she murmured. But you did. What? Elena inhaled deeply, thinking. Then she looked into Maya's eyes. Because yesterday, I realized something. She gestured to the boys. They don't have everything they deserve, and you don't have the support you need. And I, someone with all the resources in the world, was doing nothing. That ends today. Maya felt her throat close. Elena, I'm not offering charity, Elena said gently. I'm offering partnership. From now on, we make sure your boys have every opportunity. Communication therapy, schooling, safety, joy, whatever they need. Tears finally spilled down Maya's cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them this time. You're giving them a future, she whispered. Elena shook her head. No, we are. The triplets ran back into the room, all three trying to show Elena their messy pancake hands at once, tugging at her arms, signing excitedly. And Elena let them pull her into their world, laughing with them, matching their energy with her own. It wasn't wealth that made this moment beautiful. It was kindness, the kind that heals, the kind that transforms, the kind that rewrites people's hearts. And as Maya watched her boys wrap themselves around the billionaire who once frightened her, she realized something profound. This wasn't just a new chapter in their lives. It was the beginning of a new family. A chosen family, bound not by blood but by love. Later that afternoon, the mansion felt different, lighter, brighter, almost as if the walls themselves were breathing easier. Laughter echoed through the hallways. Soft footsteps pattered across the marble floors, and the triplets' curious hands found every interesting object within reach. Elena had cleared her entire schedule for the day. No meetings, no board calls, no investor briefings. She told her assistant, family emergency, but what she didn't explain was that the emergency wasn't a crisis. It was a calling. The boys had shown her a part of life money could never buy: genuine connection. Now, Elena wanted to nurture it. They were in the garden, a beautiful open space filled with roses, lavender, and a fountain shaped like a swan. The triplets ran across the grass, their tiny shoes squishing morning dew into tiny prints. Maya followed behind them, holding a small bag of snacks. Elena, Maya called softly, walking up to her. You don't have to stay out here with us. You must have important things to do. But Elena shook her head almost instantly. Nothing more important than this, she said, watching the kids chase butterflies. Maya exhaled slowly. Something about Elena's sincerity still felt unbelievable, almost too good to be true. A moment later, little Liam tugged at Maya's pant leg, signing rapidly. Maya knelt down, smiling. He wants you to see the frog they found. Elena laughed. A frog? Where? Before Maya could answer, Leo held up a tiny green frog with the proudest grin on his face. Maya gasped. No, no. Put him down gently, she signed quickly. But Elena stepped forward, kneeling right beside the boys. "It's okay," she said as she guided Leo's hands. "Let's put him near the pond, so he can be safe." Leo watched carefully as Elena lifted the frog and placed it near the water. The boys clapped silently, hands waving in the air, their version of applause. Elena's heart nearly melted. "You're good with them," Maya said quietly. "No," Elena corrected softly. "They're good for me." Maya looked down, her chest tightening with emotions she rarely allowed herself to feel. Trust, safety, hope. These feelings have been strangers for too long. The afternoon went on with more gentle chaos. Running, laughing, exploring, small hands reaching up to be held. Elena noticed something as she observed the boys. They weren't afraid of the world. They were only afraid of being misunderstood. And she felt a sudden responsibility blooming in her chest, a desire not just to help them, but to protect them. Later, as the sun began dipping into a warm golden hue, the boys grew tired. One by one, they curled up on the outdoor pillows Elena had arranged under a large umbrella, forming a pile of sleepy limbs. Maya spread a blanket over them, smoothing their hair lovingly. "You're an incredible mother," Elena whispered. Maya's breath caught. "I try," she said softly. "But it's hard. People look at them differently. They look at me differently." Elena frowned. "Because they're deaf?" Maya shook her head. "No, because we're poor." The honesty hit Elena like a wave. "I know people judge," Maya continued. "They think I'm careless or uneducated. They think my children are a burden. I hear the whispers even when my boys don't." Her voice trembled lightly. "But yesterday you could have fired me. You could have yelled. You could have made everything worse." She met Elena's eyes. "Instead, you opened your heart." Elena slowly sat beside her, folding her hands in her lap. "Maya, I've spent so many years surrounded by people who smile at me because of my money," she said quietly. "But yesterday, your son smiled at me with something I haven't felt in a long time." "What?" Maya asked. "Truth." Maya swallowed hard. "That's why I want to help," Elena continued. "Not out of pity, out of purpose." A long silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with emotions neither woman knew how to express. Then Maya whispered, "I think this is the first time I don't feel alone." Elena reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "You will never be alone again. Not while I'm here." For a moment, Maya tried to blink back tears, but one slipped out anyway. She let it fall. The boys, half asleep and sensing their mother's emotion, rolled toward her instinctively. One grabbed her sleeve, another hugged her leg, and the third rested his head on her lap. Elena watched them, her heart tightening in the most beautiful way. This wasn't a story about a billionaire saving a struggling mother. It was about connection, about healing, about finding family in unexpected places. As the golden sun washed over them, Maya softly traced her fingers through her son's hair. "Elena," she whispered, looking up. "Thank you for seeing us." Elena smiled, gentle, warm, and real. "No," she said. "Thank you for letting me." And as the evening breeze carried the scent of roses across the garden, something unspoken passed between the two women. A promise, a beginning, a bond stronger than fear. The next morning arrived quietly, as if the world knew something important was about to unfold. Soft sunlight spilled through the curtains of Maya's small staff room, warming the floor where the triplets slept in a neat row, curled up like tiny cubs. Each one clung to a different stuffed animal Elena had given them the night before. Maya sat on the edge of her bed, watching her boys breathe gently. Despite everything, they looked peaceful, safe, loved. It had been a long time since she'd seen them sleep without fear. A light knock broke the silence. Maya carefully stepped over the sleeping boys and opened the door. "Elena." The billionaire stood there holding a tray with 2 cups of tea, one black, one with milk, just the way Maya liked it. She offered a warm smile. "Thought you might need this." Maya blinked, surprised. "You brought this for me?" Elena shrugged softly. "You made me pancakes yesterday. I owe you." Maya chuckled, a light, fragile laugh she didn't know she still had inside her. She stepped aside and let Elena in. Elena set the tray down, taking in the room's smallness, The worn dresser, the thin blankets, the tiny shoes lined up neatly near the wall. Her heart tightened. "Maya," she said quietly, "you don't deserve to live like this. And your boys definitely don't deserve to grow up cramped in a room barely big enough for one person." Maya looked down. "It's all I can afford." Elena inhaled deeply. She'd spent years donating to charities, sponsoring children overseas, funding massive projects she rarely saw with her own eyes. But now, standing in this tiny room, seeing the reality Maya lived in every day, her perspective shifted. "I've been thinking," Elena began carefully, "about you, about your children, about everything that happened." Maya's hands tightened around her teacup. "And?" she whispered. Elena met her eyes. "I want to do more than help. I want to change things. For all of you." Maya's breath hitched. "Elena, I can't accept. You haven't even heard what I'm offering," Elena said with a gentle laugh. Maya stayed silent, waiting. Elena sat beside her on the bed, lowering her voice so she wouldn't wake the triplets. "I want to move you and the boys into the guest wing." Maya froze. No more cramped room. No more shared bathrooms. They'll each have their own bed. A safe space. A quiet space. Maya shook her head rapidly. "Elena, no, I can't live in your house. People will talk. They'll think I'm taking advantage." "Let them talk," Elena said firmly. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I only care that your children get the life they deserve." Tears filled Maya's eyes instantly. "Why would you do this for us?" Elena smiled softly. "Because I don't want you to feel like an employee anymore," she whispered. "Not here. Not with me." Maya covered her mouth with her shaking hand. "Elena, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elena murmured. "Just let me help." They sat there in silence, the kind that said more than words ever could. Just then, a small hand tugged on Maya's shirt. Little Leo had woken up, his hair sticking up in every direction. He rubbed his eyes sleepily before noticing Elena. He smiled and signed. "Friend." Elena's chest tightened. She signed back, slow but clear. "Family." Leo's eyes brightened. He tugged on his brothers, waking them up with clumsy enthusiasm. Soon, all three were piled onto Elena's lap, wrapping themselves around her like vines around a tree. Maya watched them, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her sons had always been labeled different, difficult, too much. People only saw their disability, not their hearts, their laughter, their brilliance. But not Elena. She saw them. She learned from them. She loved them. And that kind of love wasn't something Maya could push away out of pride. It was something she needed to protect. "Elena," Maya whispered shakily. "Are you really sure?" Elena stroked Lucas's hair gently. "I've never been more sure of anything." A long silence followed. Then Maya wiped her tears and nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll stay." Elena smiled. Relieved, warm, almost glowing. "Good," she said, "because I already had the guest rooms prepared." Maya laughed through her tears. "Of course you did." As the boys signed excitedly to one another about big beds and new rooms, Elena and Maya shared a look, one full of understanding, gratitude, and something deeper. This wasn't just about housing. This was about belonging, about rewriting the story of three little boys who had been overlooked by the world, about lifting a mother who had carried too much alone for too long, about creating a home built not by wealth, but by kindness, a home where they weren't guests. They were family. And as the triplets jumped around the room, bursting with joy, Maya whispered, "Thank you for giving my boys a future." Elena squeezed her hand. "No," she said softly. "Thank them for giving me a purpose." And just like that, a new chapter of their lives began. Not with money, not with power, but with love strong enough to change an entire world. The following weeks settled into a gentle rhythm inside Eleanor's once silent mansion. Instead of cold hallways and echoing footsteps, the air now carried laughter, tiny arguments, scribbling crayons, and the soft pitter-patter of three small children who had brought more life into the house than all the parties Eleanor had ever hosted. Harold still reported to work each morning, but now he no longer walked in with lowered shoulders. There was a quiet strength in him, a renewed confidence. His children, Little Liam, Lucy, and Lila now lived in the guest wing Eleanor insisted on preparing for them. 3 separate beds, warm blankets, a quiet room for Liam's hearing therapy, toys they never had before. It wasn't luxury that moved Harold the most. It was the feeling of safety, the feeling that, for the first time in years, he wasn't struggling alone. One crisp afternoon, Eleanor called Harold out to the garden where roses bloomed in gentle waves of color. She stood beneath the gazebo, holding a small envelope in her hands. The children ran ahead of Harold, their tiny legs wobbling across the grass, signing excitedly about butterflies. Harold approached nervously. "You wanted to see me, ma'am?" Eleanor shook her head softly. "Harold, please. Just call me Eleanor." He nodded awkwardly. She handed him the envelope. "What is this?" he asked, careful fingers trembling. "Just open it," Eleanor said. Inside were 3 documents, acceptance forms stamped and signed. Harold frowned as he skimmed them. "School enrollment?" he whispered. Eleanor smiled. "Not just any school. A deaf-friendly academy with trained staff, interpreters, and sensory support professionals. The best in the district." Harold's eyes filled. "I can't afford." "I know," Eleanor said gently. "That's why I've already paid for everything. Tuition, transportation, therapy, supplies. All 3 children fully covered." Harold's breath caught. "Eleanor, I can't possibly accept something so." "You're not accepting charity." She touched his arm with unexpected tenderness. "You're accepting a future for your children." Harold swallowed hard, unable to speak. "And there's more," Eleanor said softly. "If you're willing." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I want to promote you," she said, handing him another letter. "Head of facilities, better pay, better hours, full benefits. You've given this place more loyalty and heart than anyone. It's time you're treated with dignity." Harold stared at her, overwhelmed. "Why are you doing all this?" he whispered. Eleanor looked past him, watching the children chase butterflies in a world that finally felt safe for them. "Because your family saved me," she whispered. "Your children, they show me what real connection looks like. And you, your patience, your kindness, reminded me what kind of person I want to be." Harold blinked away tears. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Eleanor said softly, "by trusting me." At that moment, Liam toddled over holding a handful of dandelions, thrusting them toward her with a silent grin. Lucy and Lila joined him, wrapping their arms around Eleanor's legs, their small hands signing clumsy but heartfelt words. "Thank you." Eleanor knelt down and pulled all 3 of them into a warm embrace. Harold watched the scene unfold, and something inside him shifted, a realization that Eleanor was no longer his employer. She had become family, the kind of family life gives you when fate decides you deserve another chance. As the sun set behind them, casting golden light across the blooming garden, Harold stepped closer. "Eleanor," he said, voice soft, "you've changed our lives." She looked up at him, tears gathering in her eyes. "You've changed mine too." And in that gentle evening light, surrounded by 3 giggling children, a grateful father, and a woman rediscovering the meaning of love, the story found its true ending. Not wealth, not charity, but found family. A family built from kindness. A family built from healing. A family built from hearts that chose one another. And that, more than anything, was the perfect ending.